Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 297 and 298. In these episodes, Sogeking falls for a trick, but Sanji is smart enough to see through a similar trick a little bit later. Also, I want to see that Chopper is okay. And I know that he is okay, but we don't really get the resolution in these episodes that I was hoping for. And I was expecting a full closure on that chapter, and I didn't get it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Kratos for commissioning this episode. I want to mention, every time there's like a new section of episodes, Florian will send me a spreadsheet telling me which episodes to watch for which recording. And I don't think I ever noticed until today that the booking isn't the same as the sponsor on this sheet. So earlier this week, I guess, was it this week? Because today's Thursday, so maybe, the one on, January 31st, that was Michael that I should have credited for that. So apologies, Michael, for not doing that. And I'm not sure if I gave Bernadette credit on the 19th. I think I did. I think Bernadette was the one who actually booked that. But, yeah, I'm really sorry, guys, if there has been a bunch of episodes in the past as well where I credited. I think Florian's kind of the one that's doing a lot of the booking on the behalf of other people who are pooling money. And I just never even noticed this discrepancy, and that's my bad. So, especially considering that y'all went through the trouble to put together these little spreadsheets, I feel a little bit bad that I didn't pay more attention to that. So, that's on me. But yeah, thank you, Kratos, very much for the commission. Appreciate you. And, I am really excited to be we're almost at the gates of justice here. Things are really moving at a good clip. And I am still, as much as like, I feel like there, have been so many times where I've been kind of impatient with an arc and feeling like, we get it. And I don't know if it's that I like these villains more, that I like the setting more, or that I'm used to One Piece and understanding more the way that it's meant to go now. I think it's a combo of all of those things. But this arc being like somewhat drawn out just doesn't really bother me at all. And you guys don't even know how long it took me to really understand that Enies Lobby and Water 7 were going to be two distinct arcs, which I know they are based on the way that like Netflix has these organized on their website, and they have the like drop down for each arc. But I just wasn't seeing it, because for me, Water 7 didn't seem to last that long. And I don't know, I think maybe my judgment is skewed, because a lot of what happened when we were at Water 7 was the deal with Usopp. And so it was all contained to just the Straw Hats kids. And there wasn't like a big bad on the island that they had to deal with until the end. The big bad wasn't somebody that they showed up and they knew they were going to have to immediately cope with. It was like a weird combo of the Frankie pirates, who didn't really seem like they were that big a threat except to somebody like Usopp, and the issue with the mayor, what's his name, Iceberg, who was not a bad guy but was just sort of like an authority figure. So I think that all kind of fell outside the pattern enough that I was sort of waiting for the setup that we normally get, which never really happened, and that broke up I hesitate to use the word tedium because that feels really rude. But you know what I mean when you like know something is coming and you're expecting a certain pattern and a routine almost, and it doesn't happen, it will throw off your sense of timing in a way. And I think that's part of why the Water 7 section felt really, really short to me. And so then we move on to this with Robin in his lobby. And I was just feeling like this is an extension of Water 7. And it took a while for me to really get, no. Water 7 was its own thing. That's done. Now we're here. So Ice Pops. Thank you, Seraphim. Florian says the One Piece formula. Thank you. Once again, Florian coming through with the extremely basic fucking words that I should definitely know, that for whatever reason, my brain has deleted from the cache and I can't get to them anymore. Cache? Y'all, I have looked up how to pronounce that word. I don't know how many times. And my brain just doesn't want to like fucking process that information. It is kept in short-term memory. It is not in the hard drive. It's in the RAM and then it's gone. Oh boy. But that's what a lot of fans call us, as Florian. Okay, cool. So yeah, like Water 7 just felt like it didn't quite match up with the formula that I'm used to. And due to that, it's just kind of, it mixed it up. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's probably part of why I'm enjoying this so much more. So this episode, the first of the two, Hunter Sanji makes an entrance, elegy for a lying wolf, which y'all, I don't often talk about the titles anymore because they don't feel that important. But that title, for some reason, really got to me. That just, like, it's such a weird thing too, because Hunter Sanji makes an entrance. I think what we're supposed to be getting here is that, he's a hunter because he's going up against an animal. But it's just a weird thing where like hunters don't usually target wolves. You know, they target prey animals. And so the kind of energy that they're going for, I understand in a big broad strokes way what they're doing. But I also feel like that's not really the right vibe here. And then elegy, which it means like a lament, right? It means like I'm going to write this sort of, usually it's like a poem, something that like honors is typically the thing, but it can also be for somebody who was considered like a bad person. So it's not necessarily positive. Oh, you know what? Florian is saying, wasn't it a hunter in Red Riding Hood? Is that what they were doing? Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Because I was thinking that it was just like, I'm a hunter, you're an animal. But I was like, that's weird. Like, okay. Florian says, and Sanji kind of lives in a fairy tale with a princess. Yeah, that tracks. Seraphim says, goes back and forth, sometimes hunter, sometimes a woodsman. But yeah, this is playing on the Red Riding Hood theme. I think that woodsman is the one that I'm familiar with. So like that's the typical thing. So when I hear hunter, I don't usually think of Red Riding Hood. Like that association isn't there. Woodsman would work, but it's not as intimidating to the wolf when you're talking to him to say, I'm the woodsman. Like, so what does that mean? So, okay, that makes sense. And I do like Florian pointing out the like fairy tale thing with Sanji because this man, I am so torn about Sanji because he is such a like completely fickle character in terms of how many women he will just immediately be in love with and drawn to. And yet it's not like he drops the others that he was in love with and drawn to in favor of another one. It's that he just loves all women all the time. And he can he contains that love for all of them and can sustain it somehow, which is really almost impressive. So I keep thinking about what kind of husband Sanji would actually be. Because he is so devoted to Nami so much of the time. You know, he's willing to risk his life. He's always defending her. Anytime somebody talks shit about her, he takes it so personally and just considers it like his duty to defend her honor. And all of that I highly approve of. And yet we have never seen him in the position where he has to really remain loyal, because none of the women that he has been interested in have seemed to reciprocate that at all. So I am really wondering, would he be able to? Like, if something were official, would he be able to manage being loyal, or would he just be like unable to resist the siren song of all of the other women out there? I can't tell, because he's such a romantic in some ways that I want to say he would be loyal, because he seems to be the type that would begin, like, once we have been committed to each other and I am officially your husband, I'm going to take that very seriously. But on the other hand, how does he just turn off the reaction that he has every time that he sees a beautiful young girl? I guess it doesn't have to be young, but, you know, a beautiful girl. I'm extremely curious about it, because usually when we see stuff that's got like a sort of like the filler episodes where him and Nami are running a restaurant, we don't really see her having to come in. The two of them are playing almost as if they're married, and we don't really see her coming in competition with any other women. And I don't know whether to take that as like canon or if that's just a coincidence of those episodes. But anyway, maybe I will eventually find out. I do think that it is like kind of, I understand the running joke of it, but I'm also like, man, Sanji, it never has been reciprocated for him, has it? That's pretty rough, considering how intense he is about this sort of thing. Anyway, okay, so the soldiers that are on the island are still like freaking out because of the Buster call, and they're all like struggling to try and evacuate. And then we go over to Robin, who is attempting to escape from Spandam. And this is such a weird scene, because considering that everything is coalescing for them to rescue Robin, the situation with actual Robin is really boring. This is the only part that sort of drags. And I don't really blame it, because what can you really do when Robin has got her cuffs on so she can't use her power? Spandam doesn't have any real powers. He has a sword that has powers. So you could do something with that, which we see here. But there isn't a whole lot. I mean, they're not even in an interesting location. They're still on this spiral staircase. And the whole vibe is continuing to be Spandam is like a pure evil sadist bastard who enjoys hurting her and tormenting her with suggestions of what's going to happen to all of her friends, and that eventually they are going, like, he's going to personally be part of torturing her. And it's just a repeat over and over thing when we go back to the two of them. And the only thing that sort of breaks it up here is his use of his crazy sword, which he sicks on her because he can't catch up to her. She's too fast. So he uses ivory dart, and the sword goes out and it like slams into Robin. It's a really weird sort of, I was expecting, considering the name of it is dart, that it was going to be a really small, like, focused attack. But the way that the sword stretches out and hits her and the way the animation is done, it looks like it's the full size of like an elephant's head by the time it hits her like a train. It does not hit her like a dart. So I am genuinely wondering what else he's got up his sleeve with this weapon, because that was really unexpected. Considering that I think it's supposed to be partially that like, oh, well, an elephant's trunk is really long, but it's at the head is at the end of the thing. It's not like the head shows up at the hilt of the sword and then its trunk extends. The head of it is at the end of the blade, I guess. So it's not following the sort of like principles in its theming that I would have expected. So now I'm like, well, no rules apply probably to this weapon. So we're going to see some other stuff, I have to assume. Florian says, oh, the sword, you've seen the dog gun I posted on Discord a while back. Yes, I did. And thank you for that, Florian. So we briefly, all too briefly, as I mentioned earlier, go to Frankie here, and he is next to Chopper. And he is thinking about how badly Chopper wanted to help save Nico Robin, and that at least he was able to take down one of the CP9 agents, but that it's pretty crazy. His friends didn't even know what happened to him. And he forgives Chopper for attacking him. And he goes up to him and says, we better hurry. And I'm thinking that this is going to be him like trying to shake him awake. No, he just pushes his foot on Chopper's belly and squeezes all of this water out of him in a very like comically arcing sort of water fountain effect that I genuinely thought was funny. And as he's standing there wondering what the hell he's going to do, Chimney and her rabbit cat turn up and are like, yeah, we can show you the way. We know of a tunnel that will get you there. And he's like, word? Okay, yeah, let's go. And later on, when we see her, she is painting an arrow on the walls to lead them along. And Kokoro is just holding on to Chopper by the leg and just carrying him along. So that's sort of where we end things with that group. We don't really see where they wind up here. Frankie goes off on his own, obviously, because he winds up meeting with Nami later and they do their own thing. But for the moment, it seems like Chopper has been sort of removed from the equation. And Frankie also, he has like one of the keys. So he's realizing that like, or no, he has two. Once he runs into Nami, she gives him the one that she got. So yeah, they have the potential key to Robin's cuffs. I don't think they know which one it is, but she has the one for, as she puts it, freeing Zoro and Nose King. And this is a thing that happens, and I don't know if it started happening before this episode and I just failed to notice it, but the way they're talking about Usopp has been slowly changing in this episode. So it starts out with Nose King, and then it's like, I can't remember the other one she says later, but eventually she's only calling him Usopp. She uses something with the word sniper in it. And when she finally does just call him Usopp, he sort of laments the fact that it feels to him as if he isn't even like performing well enough to warrant being called sniper or king. And he's just back to his old name, which he's been trying to leave behind. So he's sort of interpreting her going back to calling him Usopp as failure on his part, which is a really bummer situation. And Sanji has to kind of be like, dude, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. You are good at very particular things, so why don't you go and do that while I deal with this? And I was a little bit worried that Usopp was going to argue with him or kind of dig his heels in because he only sees value in one particular type of performance, but he finally seems to like catch on to what Sanji is suggesting. And I was just relieved. I'm hoping that this is like the beginning of him realizing that he doesn't have to be the exact same type of fighter as Sanji or Zoro or Luffy to bring value to the crew. And I also find it interesting that Sanji is the one to encourage him to see things that way, because Sanji he's not somebody that I think of as being particularly encouraging. And that's not to say that he's ever really been an asshole to Usopp, because I don't feel like that's true. But, you know, if I were going to imagine who was going to give him a pep talk of this nature, it would have to be Sanji, Zoro, or Luffy, because if it comes from somebody like Chopper, who also can't fight, it's not really going to mean as much. And so I feel like it has to come from one of the guys that he sort of idolizes and wishes he was like. But I guess I would have thought it would be Zoro, and I don't really know why. Because Zoro has never really shown himself to be particularly supportive emotionally either. So I guess it does make sense that it's Sanji. And Luffy has like attempted to try and say that sort of thing to Usopp. But we know Luffy is just not... what's the word I want? He's not diplomatic. And he doesn't know how to like comfort without throwing in his own commentary, which I think Usopp would take extremely personally if he got it wrong. But anyway, so when Frankie asks Nami here, look, even if we unlock Robin's and Zoro and Usopp's cuffs, what happens then? We can't go back. Like, the bridge is up, first of all. The Buster Call is coming. So what is the option for us? And they begin running, and Nami says, well, you know what? There's a path ahead. And even though we may not know what's on it, the only thing behind us is certain death. So I guess going forward is our one option. And she says, we'll all gather at the gates of justice. And after that, we'll just leave it to... And he fills in, leave it to you. And she says, leave it to luck. And he's like, oh, great. Good idea. But I was like, honestly, that's the reality. That's just life. There comes a point where acting like you have things handled. That's all well and good. And you may have handled it to the best of your ability. But now we come into the hope nothing fucks it up. Because that is what life is. It's a series of interruptions to your plan. And I am very curious how we're going to, because we got a little bit of a preview from Spandam of what the sort of other obstacle course of the bridge after the gates of justice, what that looks like. So I'm assuming our friends are going to follow him onto that big bridge, but my assumption has always been if you keep going past that and into the actual like prison itself, that's kind of it for you, and you're not going to be able to find a way out of there because that has a completely different level of security. And I'm sort of realizing now that may not be true at all. They may have to go to the prison and find their way out somehow, or they don't get out and something else happens. Like, you know, not that I'm saying that they're going to wind up stuck there, but I just have had an idea that they're going to have to go forward and stop short of this one sort of line in the sand where if they go any further, there's no coming back from it. And then they'd have to turn around and retrace their steps. But based on what we're seeing here, that's the opposite of what is going to happen, because retracing their steps simply isn't really an option at this point. which I do think is kind of a smart way to tell the story so that you don't have to like retread old ground, which is always going to be a little, not always going to be like boring. I shouldn't use that word, but with this type of story that has the extreme qualities that One Piece does, you're going to want to pack some surprises ahead of them that it's almost impossible to fit into a section of the map that they've already covered. And in order to keep that fresh and exciting, you've got to keep them moving into spots that we haven't seen as an audience yet. So anyway, I'm just really curious now because I just definitely had a fixed idea of how this was going to go. And it's looking like that's definitely not how it's going to go at all. I should mention too, that evidently, and I don't know if it was when Chopper got thrown through the wall outside or if that was just like the sort of thing that triggered it, but the top part of the tower that Usopp and Zoro are in has finally just completely slid off. So they're standing there with the wolf and the giraffe out in under the open sky at this point. There is nothing above them anymore. And Nami shows up, and I just love this because Nami is like, oh, I'm going to get you guys out of your cuffs. And she cannot believe that the two of them are already separated and she's gone through all this trouble to try and help them. And I will be straight with you guys. I didn't remember it either. And I know that I think Florian like brought it up in the last episode, but yeah, she is just like, you are idiots for just like hanging around and continuing this fight. And they each point at one another and are like, well, he was doing stupid stuff. Y'all. So then we have a sort of separated thing going on where Zoro starts handling Kaku by himself. And the wolf goes off on his lonesome to deal, he's a lone wolf, to deal with Usopp and Nami, but mainly Usopp, because I don't think the wolf even sees Nami as a threat at all. So when Zoro is with the giraffe, it turns out he has a weapon called nose pistol, which is the essential finger pistol, but with his giant ass square nose, which really does make quite an impact. And I mean that literally, but he doesn't penetrate the swords. Zoro manages to block him. The giraffe goes flying nose first into a boulder, and then he leaves a square-shaped hole in the boulder. Repeat, it did not go through his swords. So the fact that I'm only now finding out what kind of attacks this giraffe has, other than I can grow very big and like kick, I guess, was one of the few things that we'd seen him do. I didn't really register how little we knew about what his capabilities are, but it's all pretty hidden still. So then we've got the wolf, and he does this thing where he sits down and pretends that he doesn't even care about his key. You know what? Just take it. I don't like bloodshed. I'm a pacifist. And it's kind of remarkable because, first of all, I am completely 100% believing that Usopp would fall for this, because Usopp is just very credulous. He's a chump a little bit. I love the guy. Y'all know I love the guy, but he can be a bit of a gullible sort. So the thing that I think is interesting, though, is that the wolf doesn't do, if you were going to tell me he pretends to give the key to Usopp to lure him in, I would have pictured him holding the key out in his hand and being like, here, come get it. Just take it. But what actually happens is that Usopp is a little ways away and the wolf tosses it to him and it lands only like a few inches in front of him. And I think that might be part of why Usopp fell for it. I like to think that he's not so gullible that if the wolf held it out in his actual hand, that Usopp would still be like, oh, okay. I think that the reason Usopp falls for it is that it does look like he is putting it in within Usopp's grasp, and that he himself is out of reach of Usopp. But what Usopp doesn't quite seem to realize is like how fast this guy is, which we are able to see later, like when he goes up against Sanji. So yeah, in like just a moment before he actually attacks, Nami spots the look on the wolf's face and she is just like, no, wait, don't. But it is too late. And he uses 10-finger pistol, which I will tell you what, kiddos, this should have killed Usopp. Honestly, considering everything, Usopp really should be dead. Like, there's just no way. But even if it weren't a case of like Usopp being much more ordinary and this attack being brutal, even if it's just a regular finger pistol, this is 10 fingers and each of them is tipped by a claw that looks to be about 2 inches long. This would kill him. It's brutal. Like, this looked really bad. I was genuinely upset over it. And what follows is Usopp once again getting himself absolutely crushed. This dude at one point shoves Usopp like face first into the ground. It is really hard to watch. There's even a moment where he's got Usopp by the throat and he's like holding him in the air by the throat, and Usopp's got his hands around the wolf's wrist like he's trying to get him to let go, and eventually Usopp just drops his hands, like he has run out of air and can't even fight back anymore. And there was just something about this that after all that Usopp has already been through, I just couldn't stand watching this again. I hated this. And that claw comes down. We have everybody in this like weird kind of negative color scheme, as if they're like photo negatives. And I'm genuinely thinking, what the fuck is going to happen to poor Usopp at this point? And then here comes Sanji. And I was truly taken off guard because low-key forgot about Sanji, and it didn't occur to me that like, oh yeah, the bathtub fell through the floor, so probably that would help his ass out. Was not making that calculation. So when he shows up and he's just fine, I was like, wait, how is he okay? And I was glad that they explained it, because I should have like put 2 and 2 together when it happened that was going to be the likely outcome. But I did not. So we've got Usopp being saved by Sanji, and I was just cheering. Honestly, this wolf has been such a ball breaker. There's something about him as a character. I don't know what it is, but the wolf gets under my skin in a way that like, Spandam is pathetic. Spandam is like a bully, and he is incompetent, has really poor judgment, and generally there's like a sense coming off of Spandam of just like a wannabe. And so I have a different sort of feeling towards him of real contempt. And that comes from feeling like you shouldn't even be in that position because you're not even good enough to do this job. With the wolf, he's very competent. He's able to pull all of this off. And like the only time he comes up against somebody who isn't falling for his shit is Sanji. So that's not my issue. It's more the fact that he just doesn't seem to... It seems like just for the sake of fighting, he's thinking about things in a very like immediate context of just, well, I like fighting and I like winning fights. So yeah, I'm going to kill you. And at one point when Nami and Usopp start to run, he looks over at them and is thinking like, ooh, maybe I get to kill them after all. And so the whole energy coming off of him isn't that he has any ideals that he's fighting for or anything like that. It's purely because he just wants to kill things. And it's just a bummer. I just don't like this. I don't like this about him at all. So this whole thing with the Florian is in the chat saying, I tried not to talk about the bathtub last time and it worked. Well played, sir. Well played. See, that's you getting a good handle on how to be the spoiled co-host, because that shit can be tough. Man, it is really hard sometimes, y'all, to know exactly what to draw Rashawn's attention to and what not. And sometimes when I draw her attention to stuff, she notices that I'm doing that and starts to believe that something is significant, and I feel like a bit of a schmuck. And then there are times where I'm drawing attention and she doesn't pick up on the fact that that's what I'm doing at all, and I feel like I'm being really obvious, and she finishes the recording never putting together anything like what I was trying to hint at. It's just kind of unpredictable. Anyway, so Sanji is here, and honestly, the way that Sanji is like smoking his cigarette and everything, I know what a sort of cliched bit this is, but I just never really get tired of Sanji's dramatic smoking. I just don't. It's always fucking badass every time. It's just, it hits every time. I always am like, look at this motherfucker. And I feel like a bit of a chump myself for always feeling that way. Oh, well, there it is. You know, he just earns that shit, in my opinion. It's one thing if he posed like this and he always was getting his ass kicked, but that is just not the way things tend to happen. So we do have a moment here where Nami is like, how did you get out of this? And he's like, the more important question is, did you fall in love with me all over again? And I was like, what are you even, sir? And he wobbles around like he's like a ribbon for a minute. I always like that effect. So let's see, where are we go? Oh my God, we go back to the gates. There is one quick thing that I forgot to mention regarding Robin and Spandam. There is a joke, and I don't think, from what I remember, that the sub did the same joke, or did it the same way, but I want to mention it because I did find it really funny. Spandam is like having to drag Robin by the hair, like I said, up the stairs at one point, and he complains about how exhausted he is and that it's her fault that he's so tired. And at one point he starts laughing and then it breaks into a cough. And he yells at her, "Look what you're doing to me. I'm so exhausted that I can't even cackle without coughing." And I don't know why, but the fact that the villain is referring to his own laughter as a cackle made my day. There's just something about the fact that he's just like, I'm not even going to say laugh. I'm going to say cackle because that's what the fuck I'm doing. And we all know that's what the fuck I'm doing. And I just really am here for things being sort of self-aware that way. Sometimes it can be overdone, but here I thought it was very funny. So, okay, let's go to Luffy and Lucci. Lucci keeps telling Luffy, you're never going to see Robin again. You're never going to get past me. And honestly, for all intents and purposes here in these scenes, it seems like that's true. He is just absolutely mollywhopping Luffy. This poor kid is being kicked around. He tries to use his like Gatling, and Lucci just dodges it all in this very Matrixy looking moment, before stopping in the exact right spots to grab Luffy's wrists and bring him to like a complete standstill. Now look, this is one of those things that I kind of live for. I love when something that we have seen be almost completely foolproof, we are finally up against a foe that it doesn't do anything for. And it's not like we haven't seen this before. Like, Luffy's gone up against Crocodile, and he's the one I think of the most because of how Luffy really should have died more than once after fighting Crocodile. But with Crocodile, a lot of the reason that Luffy was so ineffective was because of the type of devil fruit he'd eaten, making the way that Luffy fought particularly ineffective because of his like flexibility with being able to turn into sand and all this stuff. So, not to say that's not valid, but it did feel a little bit like a cheat, if you get what I mean. And the difference here with Lucci is that he isn't using any superpower exactly. He's using techniques, but he's staying in his human form, and he isn't leaning on devil fruit for any of this. So when he just dodges and then catches Luffy's wrists, and it doesn't feel like he has to exert any particular effort to do it, that was pretty intimidating. Like, you know what I mean? It just felt like it was so easy for him. And it's like there's something psychologically about knowing he hasn't really had to dip into the extent of his abilities yet. And he's already he's just winning so handily without even resorting to his full toolbox full of tricks, that there's really an effect of me being worried for Luffy, because I feel like our kid is going to be completely exhausted and then realizing he's up against somebody who still's got an arsenal that he can turn to. And Luffy's going to fucking have run out of gas by then. Now, we know that Luffy is attempting to, he's been using like these second and third gear things. We don't see him bust that out here. It's unclear to me what those are. We still haven't really been told. And I don't know if using those requires a certain amount of like food, for example. Like, how are those abilities powered? How does he do those? Do they have, I have to assume there's like a cooldown period before you can use it again. So I've been sort of waiting in the midst of this fight for Luffy to tap into that again, and he hasn't done it. And I'm also really curious because the second gear, I thought when we saw second gear that we were going to see it a few more times and then get an explanation of what it was. And that third gear would be a while from now, like the next arc. But instead we get second gear and then we get third gear. And I'm like, still sort of in this place where I'm thinking, okay, well, the next thing we're going to see is like how he does third gear. But maybe he won't. Maybe it'll be fourth gear. I don't know how he's going to do this. It may be that he's going to do a whole like 10 gears and we're never going to get an explanation until he's done all 10 of them. But all this to say that the fight between Lucci and Luffy is genuinely tense. Like, you know, I'm of course confident Luffy's coming out of this because he always does, and that's just the show. But the way that Lucci handles him is casual, and that bothers me. I don't like it. Luffy's our most badass fighter. No offense, Zoro, but like, in his way, you know that's true. I feel like it's not even that Zoro's like a worse fighter. It's just more that Zoro doesn't feel the need to step in until shit goes a certain way. He is just a lot more reticent, I think. And Luffy is down to fight anybody because he's personally offended, you know? Let's see. Florian says CP9 is the first time where we see great fighters plus devil fruit for the first time. At least I think so. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think I really like stopped to think about the fact that they were great fighters before, at least in some cases, not Lucci because he had already eaten one, but you know, before getting devil fruit, and how much more of a threat that makes them. But that's a good point. Seraphim says, definitely the first time the entire crew was pushed to their limit. Yeah. And talk about push to their limit, you know, like poor Usopp. By the end of this section, he is told by Sanji, there's something you can do. And he is super certain he's going to be able to save Robin. I'm really curious what it is that he's going to do. Because when Sanji says there's things you can do that I can't, my first thought was like about all of his gadgets. And then my next thought was about the sniper thing, which is sort of a recent development. And it could be a combination of those two things. But I don't know how that will manifest. My thought initially is, can he just like snipe Spandam? But because of the location issue, I don't know how that would even work. Spandam and Robin are still on that spiral staircase. I don't know how aware the Straw Hats are of the setup for the like bridge that's going to come after the gates, because we only know about that because Spandam was describing them to Robin. I'm assuming the Straw Hats don't know what that looks like. But yeah, otherwise, like, I really don't know. Maybe it's like to use his gadgets to like climb up and down walls and like create, I don't know. I really don't know. But anyway, okay. So I'm sort of getting things mixed up here, but I haven't covered things in order. And I've pretty much covered everything in the first of these episodes, except for Polly, which it turns out the ropes that he was bound with weren't even holding him. And everybody, like all of the Frankie pirates are like, I can't believe that you just pretended to be tied up. You wasted so much time. And they're very agitated about the Buster Call thing. So they're really wanting to get the fuck out of here. And all of these dudes are in agreement. We have got to escape this island. So we have one more check-in with the actual, like, load of ships that are heading this way for the Buster Call to just remind us that, yes, this is indeed happening. And then the next episode begins with Usopp having been told, you can do something we can't. And he is staring at Sanji, uncomprehending, as Sanji is about to really face down this wolf. And finally, it hits him. And again, don't know what this is. But I really enjoy Nami dragging Usopp away. And he's yelling about how he's injured and she's hurting him. And she's like, would you like for me to let go of you so that you can just die here? And he's like, oh, that's a good point. Okay, let's go. Sanji's fight with the wolf is pretty fun because, first of all, I always am a fan of the bad guy being like, I didn't even feel that. That was whatever. And then under his breath, like, Jesus Christ, he's fucking broken my ribs. Like, that is just a very satisfying little thing, and I like it. But also getting to see the wolf fighting and what it is he can do when he's not just like fucking around with this giraffe man is pretty entertaining as well. And Sanji gets like got a little bit until he busts out a new move. Now, the move comes after this thing that he does. The wolf tells him, I've been waiting for a man like you. I've wanted an opponent who was actually worthy. So I'm going to ask you to save Nico Robin. And this is such a stupid bit, but I really liked it. He's like, I don't know how to say this, but Robin is my long lost little sister. Oh my God, dude. And he tells this story, and I love what they do because they animate his memories with this sort of like goofy crayon illustration that really underlines how completely not true all of this is with this adorable animation. Oh, I'm realizing here's Robin in a red hood in the like way it's, I didn't even put that together. So they were doing the Red Robin Hood. Fucking Christ. Red Robin. Yum. If you guys don't know what Red Robin is, I'm sorry. That's a reference to a food chain. But anyway, I didn't see that she was wearing this hood in this like illustration, and it's right in front of me. It's been right in front of me this whole time. But anyway, yeah, he's like telling the story about how they were such good friends and they used to play on the beach. And that one day he turned his back and these evil pirates abducted her and he never saw her again. And I was like listening to this, fully anticipating that Sanji was going to fall for it, even though I was like, he heard the story of what happened to her and how she was carried away, or how she escaped, not how she was really carried away. So if he believes this wolf, it doesn't make any sense because he got straight from Robin's mouth exactly how things went down. But he's playing along, Sanji is, with the wolf in the moment. So it is like he seems as if he's buying it. And it's so great. The wolf keeps being like, I'm on my knees begging you, please save my little sister. And Sanji comes forward to take the key. The wolf begins his descent upon him. And Sanji says, as he grabs the key, you really thought I was going to buy that crap? If you're going to lie, at least make it believable. And he kicks him. And I love later on where the wolf notices that Sanji's got the key. He is so offended. And Sanji is like, you're the one who gave it to me. And I was like, that's true. You tossed it at him, sir. So I don't really know what you thought, but he says something, especially when Sanji's like, all right, bye, and just begins to run. He, in the dub, says, how dare you mock me and steal my gimmick? Because of the fact that he's supposed to be the one that lies and tricks people. I thought that was a pretty good joke. And then we get the big new move from Sanji, where he begins to spin on the spot like a top. And I really do enjoy that the wolf politely just waits for him to finish winding up this technique. Like, he could interrupt, but he seems a lot more curious about how this technique works. Like, is this just supposed to make me dizzy while I watch you? Like, what is this? What are you even doing? He's very confident he doesn't have anything to worry about. So he's like, I'll just indulge my curiosity here and let this, play out, and I'll mock you about how lame it was before I kill you. And Sanji finishes spinning, and he has one foot that's like bright red. It's on fire. It looks like when you leave a piece of metal in a fire pit and it's just, glowing. So he kicks the wolf in the chest. It is a burning kick that really hurts the dude. It's supposed to be the friction of the spinning got it this hot. It's fine. And then after that initial contact, the wolf is like, wow, that made me feel like my bones are melting. Like, this is horrible. But just that one kick I can definitely deal with. And then Sanji leaps into the air, and the wolf says, who jumps into the air when dealing with a Robushiki master? And I guess it's because he has the moonwalk power, and so he just feels that they have such good control over techniques that deal with being in the air that you should know not to come into our territory, basically. And he grabs Sanji, but Sanji tells him as they're falling, he's like, well, you almost got me, but you didn't do it fast enough. And Sanji says, that's okay. I needed you to get close enough so that I could use my other kick to finish you off. And then he kicks upward, because at this point he's like on his back falling toward the floor. And he kicks upward into the wolf's chest. And we just see the two of them like glowing as they plummet to the floor. And it's a weird moment because the wolf hits like a meteor and just creates this fucking crater in the ground. But Sanji is able to land like a ballet dancer. It's done. He's so graceful about it, which, I have said this before, and it's really not a big deal, but I do wish that the show would decide a little bit more definitively about what flying means in this universe. Because when people can fly and I'm supposed to be kind of impressed by it, I'll have seen things like this with Sanji, who allegedly can't fly, but he like pretty much can fly. Yes, he fell, but he also landed on his feet like it was nothing. So it's hard for me to really be impressed by people who can fly, because I'm not worried about my friends falling unless I am supposed to be, because the show's making me. But it never really feels like, unless they're on the Going Merry and plummeting towards the surface of the ocean, which has happened, that makes me very nervous. But a lot of the time, the falling thing just doesn't really hit as a threat anymore, because everything happens in midair half the time anyway. But anyway, the episode ends with the weirdest line. I think it won't be the weirdest line of the show for sure, but it might be one of Sanji's weirdest lines, which is, if God invented food, the devil invented spices. Which, why? I think it's just supposed to be that, because it zeroes in on his like steaming hot foot and leg when he says this. So I think it's supposed to be that like spices are hot and the devil is hot. So obviously that is who is responsible for them. But it's just such a weird sentiment, And I was like, what is... And he calls this also the devil kick, I should mention. So I would really have kind of liked it if it was called like hot sauce or something. I get that's not really the way the techniques work. Like, they're often in French, but it would have been kind of fun, if like we just did something a little bit basic like that every now and then. The attack is named Diable Jambe, right, which is devil's leg, I think. Oh, okay. And the W says devil's kick, but it probably is like a mistranslation. And Seraphim confirms devil leg. Okay. But yeah, I feel like being like the devil invented spices. I'm like, all right, I suppose. But I wouldn't mind more food puns and whatnot with Sanji. And I know that there are a lot of them that go above my head because I don't speak the language. But nevertheless, I would be cool with it. So that is the end of the episode. And I am just really, I don't know. My main concerns right now are, how is Chopper? Genuinely very worried about that. How does Usopp think he is going to save Robin? And how is Luffy going to defeat Lucci? Because I have to assume it's like one of those second, third gear things, but he has not busted those out. And I'm wondering why not. All right, I'm going to have to wrap up, but thank you guys again so much and appreciate all of you showing up. And I will see you on Tuesday. Or wait, no, I won't. Next week I am taking off, which is in perfect timing, actually. So I'll be seeing you guys in 2 weeks. So there'll be a period there where there's no recordings, and you're all going to miss me so much. But I hope that you can muddle through somehow. And we love you. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.